Channels TV's economic and data analyst, Ogunsanwo, joins us on the program now. I want to thank you so much indeed. Now, you've been looking at these developments so far and how migrants have been able to come back to Nigeria, returnees from Libya, and how the AU itself is trying to help others from other parts of the country, of the continent, back from Libya to their various countries. What have you been able to find?
So what we should, and the way we should look at it, is to look at and thoroughly understand the problem, and then we can start discussing possible solutions that are easy to implement. And so today, the Pew Research Foundation, again, it's an organization that is globally known for very accurate and non-partisan research. In the last 2 months, they've provided insights that could assist us to clearly understand what is going on. What have they done? They recently concluded a research whereby they asked Nigerians how many would prefer to live during the Civil War of 1967 than live today. Now, the evidence and the results of that research, Gimba, will surprise you. Because the conclusion was 54% of Nigerians said they would rather be living in the Nigeria of 5 decades ago than to live in the Nigeria of today. So that is the foundation. Life isn't, and life is no longer what it used to be. But again, there are 3 myths, that we need to talk about. 3 myths about the immigration challenge. The first myth is that poverty causes trafficking, and so by reducing poverty, we will reduce trafficking.
But has that happened?
No, but that is even a myth. Because if we look at poverty today, especially from the evidence from the NBS, poverty is concentrated in the north. But thankfully, we have NAPTIP, an agency in Nigeria that is involved in stopping human trafficking. Their own evidence does suggest that last year they rescued 820 girls that could have been trafficked, 820. But the concern is the first 3 states where they rescued girls, they didn't come from the north. The number 1 state where girls were rescued from is Edo State. 233 girls. Now, Edo by no means is the poorest country in the country. Is by no means the poorest state in the country.
So it's not migration as a result of poverty?
So the evidence doesn't show it's strictly poverty. Again, out of the 820, 145 girls were rescued from the north, but 233 rescued from Edo alone. So the number of girls that were rescued last year from only Edo was more than all the girls rescued from all the poor states in the north. The top 3 states, what are they? Edo, Delta, and Imo. Now, we wouldn't talk about if that had caused Imo State to set up their Ministry of Happiness, but what the evidence does really show is that the top 3 states where girls are being trafficked, where the rescue operations focus on, Edo, Delta, and Imo. So it's a myth if we totally want to believe that poverty is directly correlated to trafficking. In fact, the evidence does show that there is government trafficking. Now,
government trafficking.
Now, what is government trafficking? And I'll explain that to you. Now, we have evidence today that between January and September this year, the total value of goods we've exported, 9.6 trillion naira. Did most of these goods get exported to the US? No. Did they get exported to Africa? No. Most of the goods we've exported this year, 3.5 trillion naira, approximately 40% of all goods that have left the shores of the country and swam across the seas ended up in Europe. And so it does make us to see that the government and as a nation we see more opportunities in moving our goods to Europe. We see more opportunities in getting onto the sea and flying to Europe. We see more opportunities in sitting with the European businessmen than sitting with Africans. So if a lot of the goods end up in Europe, we've put our torchlights that Europe is where is the destination, is where opportunities are.
So you mentioned three myths, but you just talked about poverty and migration. What are the other two?
So the first is clearly poverty and migration are connected. They're connected, but we can't say if we fight poverty, we will fight human trafficking. Indeed, it is a systemic problem, and we also need to look inwards. That why are we not doing business with Africa? Indeed, among all continents that Nigeria does business with, we do business with ourselves, Africa the least. Only 1.8 trillion out of the 9.6 trillion we've exported this year was within countries within Africa. And so we do not even find ourselves attractive. We find the Europeans attractive. It's a systemic problem, and this systemic problem isn't just because of poverty. That is the first myth. The second myth is we hear a lot of discussions that ever since the fall of Gaddafi in 2011, the migrant crisis increased. Oh yes, that is true. But can we say it is just because of the fall of Gaddafi? The evidence doesn't support that. The evidence does show that based on globalization, the demand for human labor, for heavy labor, has reduced. There are three things that demand is shifted to: artificial intelligence, robotics, and automation. And so initially...
Babajide, I would like to just come in here. Let me just ask you from Abuja. You know, you've said that there's a myth that poverty has been the cause of migration, and now you've disputed that. Now you've named the top three states, all being southern states, and noting that the relative poverty in the north has not been the cause, therefore they're not in the top three. Well, the question I want to ask you is, how much does culture play a role in this? Because even though you have such extreme rates of poverty relative to southern Nigeria and northern Nigeria, they also have a very, very different cultural setting in which they come up that does not necessarily value the notions of materialism, for example, the notions of, you know, there's a better life out there, but rather, you know, that they're more kind of homegrown and used to what they're used to. What do you have to say about that?
Culture plays a big part, and that is, you're right, that is the point, that poverty plays some part, but poverty doesn't seem to play the major part in the immigration and migrant crisis we see. What we know right now is that based on the cultural differences across all the 6 zones, there are some cultures, and indeed religion, culture and religion play a bigger role than poverty, and that also allows us to look at the role in which the thirst for income and how states and how people really want to use these opportunities to be able to go to Europe to make more money. So there are some cultures that require families to earn more money than others. That is the challenge today. So we need to find a way to no longer focus on the poverty aspect of this migrant crisis, but look at the impact of 2 other factors: culture and religion. Culture and religion, which spurs the demand for families and individuals to look for other opportunities for them to make money. That is the challenge.